total insanity. Let's welcome Tony D'Angelo.
All right. Our main man, Tony D. Again, I feel like a star maker. I feel like that guy behind the scenes, just, with the big cigar in his mouth and a big hat, just making people famous. Tony D is joining us. Tony, good morning, pal. How are you, man?
Good morning, Lee Elci. Good morning, everyone. Proud to be among you.
I bring that up just kind of in jest, not really, because he's blowing up in a big way on Twitter. And you got to follow Tony on Twitter because he is constantly throwing out all these golden nuggets for you to chew on, and it's really great stuff. But, Tony, normally we go after, or you go after the governor in a big way, and I sit back and admire the way you do it. But today, you want to kind of take a little bit of a turn. You want to talk about mortgages, real estate, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we'll let the governor rest at home. I understand he's ill. Personally, I think it's some sort of a derivative of the FBI variant, but that's just my opinion, not anybody else's. But we're going to go a little bit of a different way.
I didn't know that was a COVID variant.
With this, if I may. You said something last week, Lee Elci, and I felt terrible because I really couldn't give you a good answer as to, people, corruption goes on, the abuses go on, and people just take their money or take their benefit or whatever the case may be, or they think they're powerless and they don't care. And what can you do about that? I didn't have a good answer for you. And I'm going to tell you today and what we're going to share. It's time to start caring. If you've never cared before, if you've ever sent a child to school, if you've ever gone to school yourself, if you've ever done something to make yourself better, this is something that we're going to go through that really is just incredibly insidious. And I'm frankly in shock. And you had pointed this out to me in your newsfeed. We'd spoken about it several years ago. It has the potential of destroying entire communities. You're ready. On March 22nd, the Biden-Harris administration unveils something known as you don't have to write this down, I have it if you need it, Interagency Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation. It's known as Pave. Now, Pave is an initiative. It's not a law. It's not codified just yet, but it's aimed squarely at what is deemed to be, by the people doing it, 150 stakeholders. In other words, hangers-on, people that stand to make a whole lot of money from this. And what is deemed to be the fact that home buying and home purchasing and community building and things like that is inherently racist, and we have to change that. Now, the Pave document is a 58-page PDF, and we'll get into that as we go. But then this is the nexus of the actual plan. And as far as how this thing's come about, you've got kind of your usual starting people. It's Susan Rice and Marcia Fudge, who's the new Secretary of HUD, and the godmother of all this is Auntie Maxine Waters, who cries man's inhumanity in man, but lives in a $10 million mansion in Hancock Park in California. I personally walk by it. But before we get into this, how this is going to change the world and how I'm going to use the word dastardly this can be for anybody of any sense of I want to do better in my community, I want to have a better life. Let's look at the home buying process as it sits. You got a couple, My favorite is Joe and Betty Coed. They a couple years out of college, they beat the bushes, and they're going to buy the best house they can in the best community that they can afford. So they settle on a price. However, there is one major roadblock. They have to apply for the mortgage. And even if they are credit worthy and they can pay for the mortgage, the lender or the officer of the lender, who's usually a financial institution or the bank, has to determine, is this house worth the $250,000, $300,000 that they're going to pay for it? Because if not, if they're willing to pay for it and that house isn't worth it, and for some reason they can't pay their mortgage, they get divorced or some horrible thing happens, the bank is on the hoof and they've got to sell that property for whatever they can. And so they send out someone known as a real estate property appraiser. Now, the appraiser is somebody who's trained in the evaluation of properties. And they come at different levels. There's people way in the high end of the spectrum that are known as MAIs, and there's kind of your typical sort of ham and egg appraiser that comes in and, does things for banks and things like that. And more often than not, it's a very good product. And the appraiser looks and he makes an assessment of the property, but what he does is that he looks at the properties around that. And he says, okay, well, that one there is at $275, this one's at $285, that one's $325. Joe and Betty want the house at $250. I think that is a sound investment. Now, what Pave does is they say, okay, somebody wanting to go and buy that same house, assuming they are, not economically qualified, that appraiser is racist. That appraiser is doing this so white people could get into that house. We've got to start jumping on the appraiser to give favorable valuations for people who wouldn't ordinarily do this. Now, of course, they're making it color-based. I mean, I'd be okay if you made it everybody-based, but they're making it color-based. And, it's the appraiser we've got to do something about that appraisal. We've got to bring that appraisal down so we could make the values, more palatable. Now, the standard for all of this, let's just review things that we've talked about in the past. Right now, we're under the Fair Housing Act of 1968. In other words, you can't legally discriminate against anybody on color. And does discrimination go on? I mean, please, does the Pope hand out communion? But it's like, you can't legally do it. Now, Pave comes right out and says, this whole process is racist and we have to change it. And it's racist because the people who aren't getting there, and it's wrong. Now, they don't look at the 10,000 reasons as to why, how could I put it, the 10,000 reasons as to why that particular person doesn't qualify for that property. They just say it's wrong because they can't do it. It is the stupidest reasoning. Anytime anybody reasons something, and Democrats are wonderful at this, they'll get to tortured reasoning in order to get their point across. Just to give you one thing in this, I like to call it tortured logic. One page in this 58-page PDF as to, the Pave program. Okay. Appraisers are given to racism. This is what they're saying. And they did a study, and they looked at the study, and one appraiser wrote, and these are the horribly racist things, that a majority white area was not especially diverse ethnically. Okay, what does that mean? Another appraiser noted that residents of a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood have assimilated their cultural heritage into the neighborhood. So I guess being Hispanic and having Hispanic culture is somehow a racial bias. I mean, if I was a Hispanic person, I would want to take the person in the back alley, for crying out loud. But more things that to me just, knock me off my chair. They want to control this game. And the way they do it is by regionalizing. So if you're sitting in a community that is close to a city, and in the city there is an identical house to yours, but there's a whole lot of factors in that city where that house isn't worth as much as yours, or you're in the city house and your house isn't worth as much as somebody else's, we're going to expand the matrix and say, okay, Joe and Betty Coed go and they go to buy that house, and we're only going to lend them what the house in the city would bring, so they can't get a mortgage. Unless they got a very rich grandfather, what happens? The price drops. And so the price drops, the property gets sold, and this happens 2 or 3 times. And, what's next? I mean, basically it's, here's transit, here's multi-unit housing, because you can pick the thing up. And I tell this to people all the time. I tell this to people locally. I tell this to these God-blessed people, and I really mean that because they've got hearts of gold, who are working to preserve zoning in the state, that this is a much bigger monster than just that little piece of zoning they want you to focus on. Because if you can have the strictest zoning in the world, you could have zoning, I mean, what I like to call Nazi zoning. It's like you can't put a red flower pot out in front of your house. But if I go to sell my house and somebody comes along and says, oh, your house is worth $100,000, hey, that's great. But they can't get a mortgage to do it. And I got to take the pipe and, it comes to $75,000. The next purchaser into that neighborhood is looking to buy my neighbor's house. My neighbor has been here longer than I have, has worked harder on his house for $75,000. It is a devastating chain reaction. One other thing I will say. Of course, it's government. Of course, it's largely Democratic government, and you can't do this without a program. You got to employ your cronies. You got to get people involved. You've got to have a Chinese command economy. There are courses for first-time home buyers where they teach you about appraisal bias. How about that? And then there are housing counselors who are there every step of the way to make sure that you're not being discriminated against. This is pure commie propaganda, control, economy, economics. I mean, we're used to it in Connecticut, but I'm just saying that if this thing goes on, where does this go, Lee Elci? I mean, I thought about this morning. I woke up in my fog. I had to get a key battery for my 14-year-old car. You have to get those from the dealer. So I walked in the dealer, key battery. Hey, great. Thanks very much. No charge. Hey, you're really nice people. I walked out and I saw a beautiful convertible, $150,000. I can't afford it. Totally impractical for what I might do on a given day. Now, can I turn to somebody and say, well, I want that car to be $100,000 because I am a white man in my 60s and you're discriminating against me?
Right.
I mean, holy cannoli. I'm just this is where this stuff is headed. It's unbelievable.
So it sounds a lot like this appraisal boondoggle, like the mid-2000s and the financial crisis, where folks were getting loans that they couldn't pay them back, and people knew about this, right? This is the same idea.
It's doing the reverse. Exactly. I mean, that was really, for all the things about predatory lending and everything like that, it's like these people were represented. Financial institutions should have looked to say, can they really pay it? They had representatives who were just churning and burning. This is the other thing. We're going to devalue the properties to make sure that all people can get in and share in the American dream. And I'm sitting there scratching my head and saying, these people have never worked a legitimate day in their life, because you're going to increase the value of something and get more people into it by diluting the value globally. I mean, I can't stand it.
I feel like I got to go back and look because sometimes it blurs, but I feel like there was I wrote a column about this, right?
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
I got to go back and look, but it was, and I know I got some help from you on this one too as well, so I appreciate that. And this was over a year, almost 2 years ago. So now, again, it's coming back.
Well, it started in the Biden-Sanders Manifesto. That really was the outline. Now it's coming out. So when you see the folks here that are fighting against zoning, it changes and things like that, I mean, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. The whole thing is they have figured out a way to devalue real estate properly globally. And if you can't, if you don't have worth in your home, which really is the only place a lot of people have any worth at all, you completely destroy communities, you completely destroy schools. And I can't overemphasize this enough. This is not about color. Let's do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
We've got X, the white couple, Y, the black couple, and Z, the home. And make these people as identical as you want. Same job, same income, same underwear in the drawers. They eat the same things. They got the same kids. There's no differences whatsoever. And they go to look at a property. And they don't qualify. They just can't make it. They've got to look for something smaller. Now, the white couple turns away. Caucasian couple says, okay, we can't do that. We've got to scale down. But the couple of color, if they want to, they can claim bias. They can claim, this is unfair. They can claim that, the appraiser gave us a wrong deal. We need to get into that house because you're discriminating against us. And why? Just because. That's how this particular initiative is written. I can't imagine the devastation. Let me just say this. You know me, and I am of the belief that our lovely Department of Economic and Community Development, which I like to call the Department of Economic and Community Destruction, should be abolished. If Digital Currency Group does not tell you something's terribly wrong, you need to have your head examined. But that all said, if a Republican is campaigning and if you want to do something, if you have an economic soul, an economic brain in your head, rather than tossing money off to these, NED pipe dreams of this company is going to do this and this company is going to do that, it's going to come a time when it's going to be community preservation, the fact of people preserving the values of your home, direct resources to that. This is serious. And if this starts to really get bigger and worm its way into the process, I don't know where we're headed. I really don't. It's insidious, it's brilliant, and it's evil. I can't say enough about it.
I'm looking back to when we first were talking about this. It was October of 2020.
That's right.
When this thing popped out, and we were talking about this, talked about it on the air, talked about it in the day pages as well. And, it is something that is certainly nerve-wracking for folks who sink all of their money into one big investment, which is their house. And we had talked about that, how you could lose the value of your home. I do know of any specific neighborhoods that this is actually, like, you can point to, that it's actually already happening?
Right now, no. Because it's quote-unquote an initiative. And basically, how they're going to do it, I think the whole reason why we don't get the full brunt of the crud in this state and the crud nationally is because the people are basically inept and they can't execute, or they execute very slowly. How they're going to do it is when they get mechanized, or if they have the time to get mechanized, is to put the squeeze on the banks and the lenders. So it'll be, Boogie Woogie Savings Bank, who's very particular about its mortgage lending. They're a small bank. They want to make sure they have investors. They run a clean shop. And they're not going to lend to somebody borderline. Well, hey, if you're not going to do that and you're not following these new appraisal guidelines, how much you like your federal charter? How much do you want to remain a bank? So it'll take a while for that to come. It kind of makes what 2022 really is about. And I say this to Republicans: you guys got to get in the ball game, because these are the kinds of things that are really, I know people don't like controversy and ugliness, but this is what's going on. And it's not like I'm telling a tall tale. It's there. It's 58 pages of Michigas and gobbledygook that is designed to destroy communities.
Tony D'Angelo is his name. Where do they follow you on Twitter, sir?
At Tony D'Angelo 7. At
Tony D'Angelo 7. Make sure you do it. And by the way, so Tony just gave us a great 20 minutes of radio. He's going to return with me tonight for a new, different, more. Where are we going to go tonight, by the way, on the
education.
Okay.
One of my favorite things. I got up on Sunday, we were talking about that earlier, and kind of stumbling around, and I was watching the video and the news report of Colonel Allen West and the wonderful reception he received at the University of Buffalo. And he was being assaulted for his achievement by students that were predominantly of color, and we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
Right now, I'm speechless when I even think about it. And I just think of administrators in these schools who just let it go on and they don't say a word about it. And they're supposed to be turning out people, like at my age and stage, I'd love to have that. I ain't going to have, I don't see any academics going on. Or going to have that. I ain't going to have, I don't see any academics going on. Or perspective or anything like that.
Well, so listen, if you want more Tony D, we'll have him tonight, 8:05 Eastern Standard Time. That's 5:05 out on the left coast, and we'll chat with him about that education at 8:05. Tony, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it as always.
My honor, my pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
All right, my friend. There he is, Tony D'Angelo. Quick break. We'll come back. Bruce Flax will join me next.